Hello, everyone, and how is everyone doing today? My name is Sharice Johnson Moore, and I want to welcome you to Author's Excerpt Sunday, where we have our special guest, Mr. Joseph B. Roberts. He is a mighty, mighty, mighty man of God, and he comes to share his book entitled Blessings in the Street, Special Edition, When God Leverages Our Valley Experiences. He is a mighty man of God, minister, motivational speaker, and he has come to share his book with us today. And it is about the blessings in the streets. Hello, Mr. Joseph Roberts, and how are you doing today?
I am wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Sharice, for having me on. I've been excited to have this opportunity to be on your platform, so I'm appreciative and thankful that you've extended it to me.
Oh, thank you. You are very, 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 very welcome. So, Mr. Roberts, can you give us a little background, a little knowledge about yourself?
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, Joseph B. Roberts. I am a author. I am also the host of the Blessings in the Streets podcast. I'm also a speaker. I am a relationship strategist. I'm a deacon. I'm a husband of 20 plus years to my wonderful wife, and I have a 17-year-old daughter as well. I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois, born and raised, but I currently reside in the Dallas area. And I'm just, again, as Sharice stated, I'm a man of God who is just trying to walk in his purpose that he has for my life, and just trying to impact the lives of many, whether it be through writing, speaking, or whatever means that God sees fit. I'm just really trying to make my mark on the world in a way that is pleasing in his sight, as far as, how he would like for me to lead and pour into the lives of others. So again, it's a pleasure being in situations like this to not only talk about my book, but to just talk about in general, just how wonderful and magnificent God is, and how even in the most difficult and challenging of times, we always rely upon him to carry us through, to guide our steps, to make ways out of no way, because the reality is nothing is too big for him to handle. And as soon as we understand that and understand and appreciate the relationship, to have with him and why that's so significant, that's what makes life not only more meaningful, but it makes it a little bit easier to navigate, like I said, especially during those challenging times. So that's a little bit about me.
Amen. Amen. God is so important to have in our lives. And if it were not for God, we'd be sitting here running around looking like chickens with our heads cut off.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so with, what inspired you to become an author, and to, what inspired you to become an author?
Well, a lot of times, when people ask this question, oftentimes they think, that this was something that you always wanted to do, and, it was sort of a bucket list item, but that wasn't actually the case for me. I've always enjoyed writing in general. It's something that I've been, relatively, I thought I've been pretty good at over the years, but I never thought of the idea of actually someday becoming an author. And the way that it sort of transpired was, it goes back to a conversation that I actually had with my mom some years ago. I was actually visiting her at her house, and we were just kind of sitting around, just having small talk about a variety of different topics. And in the midst of us, chatting it up, she says to me, it would be, I think people would truly be amazed if they knew, all the things that my life has entailed, good, bad, and everything in between, just all the different stories that I can share. I really think that I need to write a book. And she says, and I even know what I would call it. She said, I would call it Blessings in the Streets. And, and I think, again, people would just be amazed if they really knew, everything that I've been through over the course of my life. And so, of course, I was, when she said that, I was, I was surprised to a certain degree, but not really. I was like, I don't know, I think you're on to something. I think that would be an excellent idea. And, I would love to see it happen. Well, a couple of years later passes, and my mom did not get the opportunity to write that book as she passed away. And so, again, at the time, I didn't really think about it, but right around the 1 year anniversary of her death, I was just kind of sitting around the house reflecting, memory, in her memory, and just thinking about some good times and things of that nature. And in doing so, that conversation came to mind. And for whatever reason, it not only did it come to mind to me in that moment, but it stuck with me for several days thereafter. Like I just kept on replaying it over and over in my head, and I couldn't just shake it. And so I began to think about, why is this, lingering in my head so heavy? And I'm just gonna say, God spoke to me, and saying, you know what, maybe, basically telling me that it was never meant for your mother to write this book, but it was meant for the book to be written. It was just meant for you to do it. And so I was like, is this, is this really the, a real thing here? And so I reached out to somebody actually, and I still have the message saved in my Facebook Messenger to this date, all these years later. I reached out to one of the very few people who actually knew that my mom had an interest in writing a book. And so I connected with him, and I said, remember that conversation, my mom was talking about wanting to write a book. I said, I've been thinking, that maybe I'm supposed to do it. I said, what do you think? And their actual response was a 1-word response, and it was, duh, of course you need to do it. And she said, and the person said, you need to tap into every memory, every conversation that you've ever had with her, and just let it flow. I think that would be a great honor to, her memory. And of course, I shared the thoughts, yes, with my wife, and she, of course, concurred as well. And at the time, I didn't have a laptop. And so later that year for Christmas, I asked for that. That was my request for a gift, was a laptop. And my sole purpose for getting it was to start the process of writing this book. So I got my laptop and pulled open my Word document and sat down and just started typing and just see where this goes. And and so that's what started the process of me actually getting rolling with writing the book. And even in that moment, I still couldn't visualize at that time what that finished product would look like, and it took me some time to do. And it wasn't even because of writer's block or anything like that. Just kind of the lifing. You write a little bit and then you get away from it. You write a little bit, and you get away from it. And yes, I did that over a course of years, and eventually got to a point where, God kind of nudged me, and through another situation. It was like, basically, I believe I gave you assignment some time ago, and I've been patient with you. I need you to get this done. And I finally kicked into gear and didn't stop until it was done, and went through all of the processes of, as we go through in writing books, editing, book covers, all of that good stuff. And eventually I got to that point where I'm literally holding a book in my hands and seeing my name on it, and like, wow, this is really happening. So that's basically how it all came about. Yeah.
Yes, I know that has got to be a powerful moment for you, as this is your first written work. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was my very first time writing a book. Like I said, at this level. I mean, obviously, the only other writings that I pretty much had done was reports or papers you had to write in school or whatever. But I never had written a physical book, and
Yes.
300 plus pages on top of that. And it's like, wow, it's like, and just I was just even amazed at how much I had remembered from the different stories that that was shared with me over the years and things like that. It just really just flowed out of me. It was just a matter of locking in and getting it done. So
Yes. So, in this moment of the process of you writing your book, tell us about a particular moment in the book that details something that no one else knows about you.
Something that no one else knows about me.
Unless they read the book.
Well, that's interesting because when I originally wrote the book, the original version of the book, um,
Mm-hmm.
I never, interesting enough, I never intended for me to be the primary character in it. I wanted my mom to be the character in it. She was supposed to be the lead.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that people do get an opportunity to learn about me in the book sort of by
Mm-hmm.
default, and that really has to do with the fact that my mother and I had a very, very close relationship. So while there
Yes.
were stories that I shared about her that were exclusive to her, there were
Mm-hmm.
also a host of stories that I was able to share, that but just by default I got attached to them, because of,
Mm-hmm.
the, just again, it's by nature of the relationship. So probably a
Mm-hmm.
story that comes to mind, right out the gate, that and I'll actually share a little bit of that later, is the fact that most people probably didn't know that while people may know that I grew up in a single parent household, they don't necessarily know how I came into existence. And what I mean by that is I am the child of I am a child of an affair. My mom was a teenager at the time that she became pregnant with me. She was just out of high school. So she was 18 years old when she became pregnant with me, and she met a gentleman who was older and who, of course, is my biological father, and he was married at the time. And I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know if my mom knew prior to becoming involved with him in that way. I mean, obviously she knew ultimately, but I don't know if beforehand that she knew. But nevertheless, I am a product of a of an affair, and at the time, my dad actually, not only was he married and already had kids, but his wife was actually pregnant at the same time as my mom. And so I have a sister, one of my siblings, I should say, on my
Yes.
dad's side, is literally only a couple of months younger than me. And
Okay.
that's only because I was born prematurely. We were actually, had that not happened, we would have actually been very close, even much, much closer in age, like in terms of timing.
Yes.
And so, yeah, so when you come up in a situation, not only how it happens, but then, just what those relationships look like, in terms of the closeness that you have with the siblings on my dad's side, which I talk about that at points in the book. But overall, there was only one of those siblings that were in my dad's household, was I ever close to. The other ones, they've been very distant with me over the years. Only speaking, I might get a
Yeah.
hello, and that's
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Yeah.
Um, and again, we've all known about one another since,
Yes.
since from the pretty much from the beginning, but it just
Right.
never manifested itself in that way.
Mm-hmm.
With the exception of just one of my siblings, which was my sister, Teresa. And
Mm-hmm.
I speak about her on a number of occasions, and in some significant stories in the book that I won't give away. But
Okay.
she was the one who pretty much from the very beginning
Mm-hmm.
accepted me for who I was, acknowledged me as her brother, and she, would, over the course of our lives, be a part
Mm-hmm.
of significant milestones and events. So she was at
Mm-hmm.
my wedding. She was, she came to my college graduation. She
Mm-hmm.
has spent the holiday at my house for Thanksgiving before, So there have been certain milestones that,
Yes.
it's cool that you have, a sibling that, in despite the circumstances, that was willing to connect with you like that and receive you as basically as family, And so it's unfortunate. I don't have any grudges or anything towards the other siblings. It is what it is, But there are some times when I feel, I guess if the proper word is, feel sad about it, that there isn't that connection, because there are cousins, I have nieces and nephews that I've never met, that they don't know who I am, because we don't have that relationship. But
Yeah.
fortunately, through the one sister that I did have a connection with, I was able to form a bond with nephew and niece, and have time to connect with them and things of that nature. So that's probably one of the things right out the gate that people might not know, aside from, again, perhaps knew that I grew up in a single parent household, but not necessarily knowing how that transpired to that point. So
Now let's step into this writing process.
mm-hmm.
What was your writing process for this book?
Like I said, when I finally got my laptop and opened up my Word doc and everything, what I think what I initially did was I had a little notebook that I was using exclusively for, the writing of the book, and really all I did was sort of wrote down stories that came to mind that I thought I wanted to tell. Like I would just kind of come up with the titles, this story, and I tried to put it in a chronological order of events. Really, like I said, trying to figure out how long of a time span that I wanted to go. And because I initially, if there was any hiccup along the way at first, was, as I shared earlier, because I was trying to make the book about my mom and not really about me, I did struggle at first as to which stories to tell. And it just became obvious after my efforts in trying not to tell certain stories that it was impossible, again, for me to talk about the life of my mom without including those stories that incorporated me. And that wasn't, and coming to the understanding that it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. That I could still put her at the spotlight as being, think of it like, a movie where, I like to think of her as the lead actress in this movie. And I like to think of myself as the supporting actor, if you will. And so once I got over that and stopped, worrying about, am I too much in it or whatever, because my being in it mattered. It solidified what our relationship represented. And it also solidified how God's connection to that relationship plays out. So it was a necessary part of the process. So once I got past that, then it was much easier for me to say, okay, let's tell this story. Let's tell this story. And then of course there were a couple of stories that, anytime you're writing a book that's based on true events, there's always those moments in time where you begin to wonder, if I tell this story and it involves somebody, let's just say outside of myself and my mom, and you say, well, and the comment that I might have about a particular person is not necessarily favorable, which I didn't necessarily, there was no one particular character that I mentioned in the book that I, spoke very negatively of per se, but there were moments, where somebody might have said and or did something that was relevant to my mom's experience that I was aware of, whether I personally witnessed it or whether she personally shared it with me, that I felt was important to talk about. And so that was an awkward moment to a certain degree. It's like, what if this person reads it? How would they feel? Those kind of things. But even then, I still felt comfortable, and moving forward with it, because it was never about being disrespectful towards any one person or anything like that. It was more about expressing what was going on inside of my mom, in her heart, in her mind, how she felt about certain situations, whether she was in those moments where she felt really good and felt, that she was relevant, and then in those moments where she didn't, where she maybe felt like, slighted, where she maybe felt like mistreated, particularly by some people who were supposed to not be like that, because these are people sometimes that you call friends that, don't always act like friends. So there were moments that I mentioned about that, even to my, even sharing about some instances with my grandmother in the story, who I was also very close to. I talk about stories that, that are good time, loving, fun times with her in the picture. And then I talk about some moments where there was some conflict between my mom and my grandmother. So being respectful of her memory, but at the same time, keeping it real about some of the things that came about, So, you have those little challenges here and there. But overall, I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better flow, if you will, of the writing process. It really was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be in terms of the telling of the stories. Like I said, I was really mindful of the fact of not wanting to paint an extreme picture either way, because I know sometimes when people write books about, especially when they're again true story type books, sometimes they'll go to one extreme where everything was all rosy and perfect and picturesque, and it's like that doesn't sound, it sounds too good to be true, so to speak. And then sometimes people go to the opposite extreme and they make it seem like it was such a horrid, dreadful situation, almost like as
Yeah.
if they're thirsting for sympathy and all that. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to exaggerate a situation either. So
Yeah.
I wanted to keep it as raw and real and relatable as I possibly can, so that
Mm-hmm.
anybody who is reading it, regardless of your gender, age, or whatever, uh,
Yes.
ethnicity or whatever, that there's some story, and I still stand by this. Anybody that reads this book,
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be at least one or more stories in the book that you're going to be able to identify with, whether it's something that's personally you've gone through or are going through right now, or perhaps you
Mm-hmm.
know somebody that's close to you that has gone through or going through it right now. I wanted to make it raw and relevant, and I've carried that same mindset, as you already know,
Mm-hmm.
even through my podcast. I'm not
Yeah.
big on getting caught up in the editing and trying to create this perfect setting. I want it to be raw. I want it to be relatable, because it's
Yes.
easy to clean it up and make it all sound
Pretty.
like, and in the end everybody lived happily ever after. Well, not always, and everybody doesn't
Mm.
always had a happily ever after. Sometimes it didn't end
Right.
like that. Sometimes it ended
Amen.
on a bad note. Other times it ended up
Yes.
on a high note. We
Yes.
can have both can
Mm.
coexist,
Yes,
because
we
it's a
can.
part of the journey. And so
Amen.
that's what I tried to make this was about: a
Mm-hmm.
journey relationally with, again, between mother and son, but also a journey relationally between, ourselves and God, and
Mm-hmm.
how he plays a
Yeah.
role in the mix of all of that. So,
Yes.
it was a pretty smooth process with the writing, just really wanting it.
Right.
My ultimate goal was to make it as real and true, as close to the details
Mm-hmm.
as I could recall them to be, as humanly possible. I didn't want any part of it to be manufactured or fake just for the shock effect or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
When you read this book,
Yeah.
even if there are some things that make you raise your eyebrows on, it did
Mm-hmm.
happen. It wasn't a blemish. It wasn't me trying to blow it up a little bit more to make
Oh,
it sound extra
yeah.
exciting. It really
Yeah.
did go down the way I said it went down.
All
So
right.
that was my
Yes.
thoughts in that.
So how long did it take you to write and publish your book?
Well, again, when I did the original version of Blessings in the Streets, I started writing that back in. I initially began that process back in 2012,
Mm-hmm.
and by the time I officially finished the first copy and it was ready for release, I released it on January 28th of 2022. So we're literally talking about almost 10 years that I wrote it, and that it took me to write it. And again, it wasn't about writer's block. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
again, on again, off again, on again, off again, and you don't realize how much time will just get past you,
Yeah,
and you're
I
stalling for
know.
whatever reason to get it done, until it's finally done. And so,
Yeah.
um, that original version came out in 2022, and then what ultimately inspired the special edition version, which I
Mm-hmm.
began writing towards the latter half of 2024, was when I
Mm-hmm.
first came out with my original book. It was during COVID, and
Okay.
so I never got the opportunity to really put it out there the way that I wanted to, because we were just dealing
Mm-hmm.
with so much with the environment of COVID and things of that
Yeah.
nature. And I felt like, while I was proud of the work, I just didn't feel
Yes.
like because of the circumstances that were going on, I didn't really feel like I had a chance to push it the way that I wanted to present it to the world the way I wanted to. So, um, in the latter, probably around late summer of 2024, I
Mm-hmm.
had a guest on my show,
Yes.
who we had a wonderful time on my podcast, and I came to find out that she was a publisher, and we just happened to have a conversation. I don't even know how we got on the conversation, but I made mention to her about the first release of my book, and she was
Yeah.
like, you need to re-release it, and so you can have the opportunity to present it the right way. And she said,
Yes.
and I want to help you. I want to help you do that. And so I was like, it kind of threw me off, but I was like, okay, because it was something I had already been thinking about. And so for her
Yeah.
to say that, it was sort of confirmation. And so
Mm-hmm.
we began the process. And so she took my original writing, and we kind of put our heads together and basically not only retold the stories, to give it
Yes.
a fresh perspective. So like if you read the special edition version in comparison to the original version, you're going to see there are going to be some stories that are in both books, but even the ones that are stories from the original, they've been retold in a way to where it's like reading it for the first time again, because there's certain facts, certain elements of it that may not have been in the original that I've included in this one. And then also I've included a bonus chapter in my special edition version, which does, to your earlier question, which does give you more insight about me. So people get to learn more in depthly about me and my experience, in not only coming up in my relationship with my mom, but also what I like to highlight is just my overall walk with God and how I got to that point and the things that I went through along the way. So that's in the bonus chapter that's in my special edition book, which on top of that, that's actually the longest chapter in the book, in the special edition book. So you get a lot of content. So in the original book, you have a 70-year time span from 1951 to 2021. But just in the bonus chapter that I have in the new book, that's a 40-year time span. So I'm basically taking you from 1985, right around 84 to basically from 84, I should say, to 2024, to kind of to the present.
Okay.
So it kind of gives you a prequel sequel kind of vibe to the bonus chapter where I do some reflecting back, but now it's more focused on me. So people get to learn more in depthly about my experience in it all. And I get to share more stories that people necessarily may not know about me, may not know about my experiences with my mom, even as loving and as close as a relationship that we had. There were some challenges along the way. There were some things that came about that impacted how I would even, respond in life as an adult, certain ways, certain decisions that I make and things of that nature. So now you get a full circle approach of both of us in the special edition version. So literally, the release of the special edition version came out on January 28th of 2025. So exactly 3 years later is when the special edition version has come out, which is, of course, of this year. And so now that's been up and rolling, and the early responses of it have been, the early reactions, I should say, of it have been very positive, even for people who have read the original version. They can tell the difference. They like the different approach, the different vibe. Not so much that one is better than the other. It just gives them more. It just gives them more into the story, more into the journey. But at the core of it all is how God plays a role in it. And allowing us to get through those challenging and difficult times of life, as well as how He makes ways for those fun and memorable and loving and wonderful moments as well. So it's a little bit of everything, in the reading of the book. So that's what that's been like for me in that.
So you ready to read an excerpt for us, Mr. Joseph?
Oh, sure. I would be happy to.
All right.
Yes. This part of the book, this is actually, this particular story is referenced as, it's called Somebody Else's Guy. And here it is. At the age of 18, my mom was like many teenagers approaching adulthood. She wanted to experience independence, run the streets, and make her own decisions without interference from a parent. Like many young adults, she was also keen on expanding her social life, which naturally included dating. Being overweight as a child had been a source of insecurity, but as the years passed, her full-figured curves began to settle in all the right places. With the addition of makeup, lipstick, and stylish clothing, she no longer had to worry about chasing after anyone. The men were now chasing after her. Up to that point in her life, my mom had boyfriends and occasional crushes, but was never seriously involved with anyone. However, all that was about to change in a major way. One night, while out with some friends, she met an older gentleman at a bar. This man was 14 years her senior, dressed impeccably, drove a nice car, had money in his pocket, was steadily employed, and knew exactly what to say to sweep a young woman off her feet. My mom held her ground with this smooth talker at first, but eventually fell head over heels for him. The age difference didn't bother her. She was naturally drawn to older men due to her own maturity. In many ways, he seemed like the guy she had always dreamed of meeting, the one she could someday fall in love with. But as with anything that seems too good to be true, he fell right into that category. I don't know if he fully disclosed everything my mom had the right to know up front, but at some point, this dream guy revealed that he was a married man with children. That, however, did not stop him from pursuing my mom intimately. Why my mom chose to continue seeing this man after learning of his marital status is something I find puzzling, especially since she was never known for embracing the role of side chick or mistress. I can only attribute her decision to the impulsiveness of being young and in love. This same man, however, would ultimately become my biological father. When my mom found out she was pregnant, she never demanded that my dad leave his wife and family for her. She enjoyed their time together, but knew deep down their relationship had no future. She managed to keep the pregnancy a secret from my grandmother for nearly 6 months. During that time, she wrestled with the difficult decision of whether to keep me, have an abortion, or give me up for adoption. Finally, the day came when she revealed her pregnancy to my grandmother. What she didn't expect was my grandmother's simple yet profound response. If the dog can eat, so can that baby. My mom was both relieved and overjoyed by the unexpected support. On May 20th, 1970, she gave birth to me and named me Joseph in memory of her late brother. My dad stayed in touch with us over the years, so he wasn't completely absent from my life. However, he didn't contribute to my financial well-being, and my mom never took him to court for child support.
I gotta get this book. I gotta get the book. Now I done got drawn into the. Hey, let me. Okay, now. Okay, where the story going? And be like, okay, you got to get the book to get the rest of what you want to know, right?
Now, just to kind of give you some context to just that story that I just shared, you got to understand that at this point, my mom and my grandmother are living together. My grandfather's no longer in the picture. They are in poverty. And so they're struggling already by themselves. And so mom, grandmother, and a dog. And now here my mom is walking in the door, got a baby and scared to tell my grandmother, not knowing what she's going to say. I mean, you just imagine any parent, like, we can barely feed our own selves, So what I find so profound, and I've heard this story multiple times over the years, which is why I was able to write about it, was I found so profound that my grandmother in that moment, when she finally does find out, saying, if the dog can eat, so can that baby.
Yeah.
Now, I'm thankful that my grandmother, while I'm in the womb still, thought enough of me and thought enough of my mom to say, we going to figure it out somehow.
Amen. Right? That's what grandma be doing.
That's what grandma be doing. Yeah, we gonna work this out. Yeah, it may not be the best time and best situation, but we're not talking about giving up. We're not talking about, aborting. We're talking about if that dog can eat, this baby's going to eat too.
Man, I know.
And I'm still here today. I obviously I didn't miss no meal. At least that's what my stomach shows. I didn't miss no meal. So yeah, that was important, and that was a significant turning point in the relationship with my mom and grandmother as well, because there were some other challenges that they had going on at that time outside of the poverty, which I'm not going to mention because I talk about it in the book. But that there's some significance to that moment in time that let them know that they were that for their own collective reasons as well as individual reasons, that they were going to be okay. And ultimately, as you know, being a woman of God yourself, we have to give credit to God for that, of making that happen, and thankful that my grandmother exercised faith in knowing that I don't know how the math is gonna math, but we're gonna make this work, and she's trusting the ultimate one to trust in making sure that happens.
Yes. Oh, yes. So, if you were to sit in front of a group of aspiring authors, what would your best advice be to aspiring authors?
I think the first thing is, when it comes to inspiring authors, it's so easy for you to get caught up in trying to find the right and perfect time to start the writing of your book. And so from an advice standpoint, I just say, quit trying to look for perfect conditions, because the mere fact that you have a story inside, and I've learned this over the years, that everybody has a story to tell. Once you recognize that you have a story to tell, then the right time to tell it is now. And so the advice I give is to just get started. Not just for the sake of being able to have bragging rights that I got a book that I wrote, but understanding that your story, while you might downplay its significance, while you may not fully understand the power behind it, your story can be life-changing for someone else.
Amen.
Whether you realize it or not. What might seem to be a happenstance moment for you could be a game changer for somebody else. And that's why in the writing of my book, when I told you about I had this delay of literally years of delay in getting this done, and God had to allow for a storm to come in my life that was totally unrelated to trigger me to get this book done, because while I didn't understand it at the time, I eventually came to the recognition that, you know what, this was God's way of saying, not only do I want you to get it done because this was something that I told you to do, I want you to get it done because you're holding back a blessing for someone. I've equipped you with a story to tell so that you can bless other people. And the longer you keep dragging your feet, that person or persons that are supposed to be blessed by what you have to share are not receiving it because you're dragging your feet. You're not getting on top of your assignment. So again, to our aspiring authors for tuning in, get started. Don't worry about it being perfect. Don't worry about the words all flowing exactly the way that they need to. Just start writing, however that looks. For some people, it might be like, if you're like me, you like to sit in front of the laptop and start typing. Somebody else may like a pen and paper. Somebody else might like a recorder and to just speak in it. It doesn't pick the method that works best for you, that's most comfortable for you, but get started.
Amen.
Get the story out. And then once you get it out, then you go back and tweak it and perfect it and clean it all up, make sure the punctuation is right and all of that good stuff. And you got time to pretty it up.
Yes.
But right now, get it out of you. Get that story up out of you and onto the paper or onto the screen or onto the recorder so that you can continuously move forward to what God is directing you to do, to share your story with the world, to impact in whatever way that impact is supposed to be. I know people write on a variety of different topics. It's not always going to be based on true events. Sometimes it may be more of a creative, whether it's a romantic novel, whether it's a scary book, whatever. If God has called you to write that book, if God has said that this is something that I want you to put out there, that this is in alignment with what I want you to be writing about, because let's keep it real. Every book that's written is not a book that should be written in terms of what you're speaking about. And it doesn't even necessarily mean that every book has to be a quote unquote, a book that's every other sentence is a scripture drop. I'm not even saying that. But if you feel that it's been put on your heart, it's put in your spirit to write, you take that thing to God and get confirmation. Is this what I'm supposed to talk about? Is this the story that I'm supposed to share? And if he gives you that confirmation you've taken to him in prayer, then get started. And he will let you flow. You don't even have to be the greatest writer in the world. You might say, I sucked at English. I got really bad grades on my papers. We live in a day and time right now that all the technology will clean up all that stuff for you. Just tell the story. Because see, the story, no matter how quote unquote good of a writer that I am, my story is always going to be perfect.
Yes.
Everybody's story is perfect.
Yes.
Regardless of the grammatic nature of it, regardless of the perfection in the sentence structure, whatever. Your story is your story. That story is perfect. So you don't have to clean up the story. The story is perfect.
Yes.
We can do all that other stuff on the back end.
We can do all that
to make
later.
It readable, to make it presentable for people to receive. All that. Don't get caught up in that part. Get to writing. And once you get going, you're good, because now you've developed a momentum, you've developed a flow, and that's what happened with me. Once I got started, it was hard to stop. It was like I'd be up late, and sometimes something would come to my mind, like, let me get this down. I don't want to lose this thought. Just get it out.
Yes.
And you'll oftentimes find out, depending upon the nature of the story.
Yes.
Especially if it's based upon personal experiences, personal traumas, or something of that nature. In many instances, the writing of the story may actually be therapeutic and healing for you, depending upon what it is that you're writing about. You might have some stuff in you that, God is leading you to bless somebody else with, but you're also being blessed in the writing process, because you're letting out something in you that you've been holding inside for a really long time.
Freedom. Freedom.
that you never felt a safe space to get it
Yeah.
out in. And
Yeah.
now you've been given a pathway, an opportunity.
Yeah.
Let me get this up
Yes.
out of me. And for
Like
those
kind
who
of
experience
breathe.
that, yeah.
Yes.
If that's been the experience for you, once you get them final words on the paper and it's the final period, and you're just like,
Yes.
wow, man, the weight, the lightness
Oh.
that's inside of you, that
Oh.
because you just lifted something up out of
Lift.
you and put it
Yes.
out
Lift.
there. It's come up
Yes.
out of you, and yeah, you not only feel better, but you're about to make
Mm-hmm.
some other people feel better because
Yes.
they're holding some stuff inside too, and it's
Yes,
going to be
they are.
your story that triggers them to ignite
Mm-hmm.
that healing process, that therapy
Mm-hmm.
process. So you don't
Yes.
minimize your story at all. Nobody's gonna really think.
Oh.
I run into this all the time on the podcast. I've
Mm-hmm.
invited people on, and I ain't really got much to tell. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Nobody's gonna care about that.
Yeah.
You have no idea how much people you just don't know.
You
You
just
just like I say on the
you don't.
podcast. I say with your book, you may never see their faces, you may never know their
Mm-hmm.
names, but your
Yeah.
story is game changing. It's life changing for them. You got to tell it.
It is. It is so much. It is so much a game changer when you tell your story in that magnitude. And so, Mr. Joseph, what does your future look like as far as projects, events, book signings, things of that nature?
Well, right now, again, I'm in the process of really just trying to get myself out there with regards to my book. For example, I just recently did an author meet and greet at a local bookstore here in the area. So that gave me an opportunity to be in front of some folks who I wouldn't necessarily, see on a day-to-day basis. They're not connected to me on social media or whatever. They're just random folks who are in a space that enjoy reading,
Yes.
and they're looking for a good story to tap into. So this past weekend I had a chance to do that, and I want to do more of those type of events. Obviously, I'm also into speaking. So, I'm connected right now with a nonprofit here in Dallas, Healing, Empowerment, and Transformation. And so we have a number of different events coming up. One in particular, we have a men's conference coming up in July. It's going to be an awesome event that I'm going to have an opportunity to speak at. We have a women's conference coming up as well this May that I'm going to have an opportunity to be at. So I'm really just looking at any setting that I can be in, that I can, again, pour into others about what it means to be in relationship with God. That's why when you hear me talk about, identifying myself as a relationship strategist, I don't mean that in terms of teaching people how to, be good as boyfriend and girlfriend or husband and wife. It's not specifically about that as much as it's about what does your relationship with God look like? Because if that relationship is established, then that helps all other relationships. God has to
Yes.
be, if you want your money relationship to be right, God has to
Mm-hmm.
be, it's got to be you, God, and the
Mm-hmm.
money. If you want the marriage
Yeah.
to be right, it's got to be husband, wife, and him. If you want the
Mm-hmm.
parental relationship to be right, it's got to be mom, dad, and God in the mix of being the parents. If you want the
Mm-hmm.
job situation to be right, he's got to
Mm-hmm.
be connected to all of that. So
Yes.
this is what being a relationship strategist is about in terms of
Mm-hmm.
sharing with people how you cannot expect these various relationships that we engage with over the course of our lives to work out in the long run if you're trying to do it without him. And
Yeah.
so any opportunity that I have to speak to that, write to that, share in any way possible, those are the opportunities that I'm seeking and looking out for. I have a host of different topics that I speak on, that I'm available to speak on, that people can find out about me if they're interested in whether it's hearing me speak directly or or workshops or anything of that nature. I'm able to do all of those various things. So, and of course, I also have a book that'll be coming out later this month. It's actually a supplemental guide to my Blessings in the Street Special Edition book, and it's called 12 Steps to Building and Leveraging a Relationship with God. And so it just kind of helps people with that journey of building
Yes.
a relationship with God. You'll be able to identify, where am I at in this 12-step process, and what is my next
Yes.
steps to get to that next level in that relationship, ultimately trying to get to the point where I am fully in surrender mode. to
Yes.
God, where there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing that I leave off the table that I don't connect with Him. So it identifies where you are, whether you're at the very beginning of the process, where you're just figuring God out, just trying to work through this, or somebody is somewhere in the middle. Maybe you're close to being saved. Maybe you just got saved. Because even to that, a lot of times, even those of us who have given our lives to Christ, there are many of us who believe that when we get saved, that's the end of the line. That okay,
Mm-hmm.
we've arrived, and we actually know.
That's the
You
beginning.
actually you moved, you made some progress, but you're not done yet just because you gave your life to Christ. There's more to it. So the 12
Mm-hmm.
steps in building and leveraging a relationship with God captures all of that. It walks you through that
Yes.
process, gives you not only step by step things for you to tap into to help you get to that next level, but I also have affirmation, scripture in there as well, and
Mm-hmm.
opportunities for you to track and keep notes of things for yourself to reflect back on, that will help
Amen.
you in that journey.
Amen.
Because everybody's not going to be comfortable always just dealing strictly with maybe going to I mean, church is obviously part of the process, but you don't. Let me put it like this: you don't want to just depend solely on, well, I go to church every Sunday. Well, that's great, but what other
Yes.
things are you doing in addition to attending, an hour, 90-minute church service? What else are you doing to help you build that relationship with God? What else are you doing
Yes.
to level up that intimacy in God? And
Mm-hmm.
how are you covering yourself? How are you, as the Bible says, how are you putting on that armor for the
Yes.
attacks that are going to come? Because trust
Yes.
and believe, as you
Yes.
work towards trying to build a much closer and more intimate relationship with God, the enemy is
Mm-hmm.
not pleased with that. And he's going to do things to try to distract you, to try to
Yes,
deter you,
you.
to
Yes,
try to get
you.
you, to try to get you thinking some kind of way, second guessing your
Yeah.
decision. And
Roll
the
you off
further
the
you get
track.
along, the more intense his
Yes.
attacks are going to come. So you got to be ready for that. And so
Yeah.
this book will capture those things and helping people better understand what that journey is like. So again, I say
Mm-hmm.
all that to say, not only with this upcoming project coming up, but I want to do more
Mm-hmm.
writing. I just want to tap into whatever a variety of different ways and approaches that I can do to try to reach people, to share who God is and why it's important to be in relationship with Him and how that impacts everything that we do in life, especially when it comes to dealing with the adversities and challenges of life.
Yes. So, where can the people find you, Mr. Joseph?
Absolutely. Well, if you are interested in finding out about products and services and just as a whole, I would say go to Mr. Joseph B. Roberts Card.com. That's
Mm-hmm.
my digital card site where you'll find, again, everything that I offer in terms of products, services, upcoming events, things of that nature. If you're
Mm-hmm.
specifically interested in getting a copy of my book, you can also find it on Amazon. And if you desire to get a autographed copy of the book, I would suggest that you reach out to me directly, and I'll give you details upon that where I can ship it to you directly and make sure that
Mm-hmm.
it's autographed for you. So this is what the book looks like, Blessings in the Streets, special edition. I'll be
Mm-hmm.
more than happy to sign that for you and send it to you. So you can
Amen.
just DM me directly. I'm available on all social media platforms. I have my personal Facebook page, Joseph Roberts. I have a Blessings in the Streets Facebook
Mm-hmm.
page. I'm also available on I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram. So whichever
Yeah.
one is your platform of choice, you can connect with me. And you can even email me at God Plus One LLC at gmail.com. I'm open to all of those avenues to be reached out to. I consistently post on social media, just inspiring information. And of course, as I shared earlier, I do have my Blessings in the Streets podcast, which is available on YouTube as well as other platforms that people like to listen to their podcast to. You can check that out as well. I host episodes on that Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So definitely check me out. We're in season 3 of that. And this Saturday, I'm actually going to be reaching my 200th episode. So so it's been a great ride. Again, another thing that I never thought I would be doing, but
Mm-hmm.
the book was actually a starting point that,
Yeah.
and the podcast is basically an extension of the
Yeah.
book. where I can hear more blessings in the streets stories from
Yes.
people all over, of all walks of life. That's how you and I connected.
Yes.
And I had a wonderful time with you on the show. So to the listeners, when it's time for Sharice's show to air, you're going to be blessed. It's going to be a good time. So, make sure you don't miss out on that. And I'll be posting about it when that time comes. And, so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm just really just trying to just let God lead my steps, and just becoming more and more reliable on him and depending upon him, stepping out on faith, and just, keeping my mind and heart open to what he has for me. I don't say these things because I'm perfect, or that I don't have my shortcomings and downfalls. I mean, I'm working through just like everybody else is, but I'm having a better understanding, and I'm appreciating more those storms of life, because I understand that they're not negative events, but yet they're opportunities for growth, they're opportunities for development, and that's how I'm approaching it. I'm like, if God has allowed that thing to come through, that storm to come down my street, I know it's not to destroy me. I know it's not to take me out. It's to bless me. It's to equip me to be a blessing to other people. It's an opportunity for me to serve in a different capacity. It prepares me. It elevates me for him to use me in a multitude of different ways that I haven't even thought of yet. And the more I'm open and willing to receive that, the better off life will be for me, as well as for those who he's called, that he's predestined for me to pour into and or come alongside of. So that's where I'm at. That's what I'm looking to do. And I'm just excited about what he has in store and how he's going to navigate that thing out. I'm not, I'm not worried about how it's going to happen and when it's going to happen. I'm just trusting that it will, however he sees fit for it to do so. So that's where I'm at right now. And just letting him use me.
Amen. Well, Mr. Joseph Roberts, it has been a pleasure in having you here on Author's Excerpt Sunday. So when you come out with this other book, you got to come back, right? You got to come
absolutely.
back.
No problem. I would love to come back. You and I had a wonderful time on my show. I've had a wonderful time on yours. So all you had to do is invite me. I'll be back. So and you just like, you got an invite to come back for, with me anytime. So yes, yeah. You ain't getting rid of me that easy.
I know, right?
All right. You stuck with me now.
I'm gonna be right there with you. Roll out. Oh,
there you go. That's right. That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Thank you so much for joining us today on Author's Excerpt Sunday. And I want to say thank my audience for becoming involved and watching and sharing our broadcast. And I want to say everyone have a blessed day, and see you next time on Author's Excerpt Sunday.